The first way we will look at to organize your files and folders is the way that the original Angular seed project is organized. This is to create just one file for each type of object. Each of these files holds a different type of object, and that file holds all of the objects of that type. This is definitely not a recommended method. There is really only one obvious advantage to this method. Once you set up your script files in your HTML, you won't have to remember to add new ones as you add new objects to your Angular project. If you add a new controller, since controllers.js is already included in your page, you won't have to do anything besides write the code. The drawbacks to this method are significant. After only a few objects of each kind, then each file becomes a haystack in which you try to find the specific controller or service you are looking for. If you want to reuse any code, that is pretty much impossible, and you have no idea by looking at the directory how big your application is. This is the first logical extension of the previous method. Just throw all your files in one directory, but separate them out into a separate file per object. This gives you way more organization than the last method, and this works really well for tiny applications and sample applications. This method, however, has some significant drawbacks. The most glaring drawback is that after you get more than about 10 files, then your JS directory is just a big, huge garbage dump, and finding a specific file is a huge pain. The next organization option is to organize your files into subfolders by type. This works a bit better for sites with a few more files, but there are still some serious drawbacks. First, if you get more than about 10 of any one kind of file, then it's hard to find the correct file. Also, as this organization method grows, it basically devolves into 4 or 5 big piles of objects. That's better than one big pile, but it's still not great. Another drawback is that files that are actually used together are separated out from each other, so your schedule controller and your schedule service are far apart from each other. The next option is to organize your files by feature. I'm using the word feature loosely here. Basically, files that are parts of the same function in your site go together in this layout. This organization method works well for medium to large sites. I would recommend this for sites with anything over 15 different JavaScript files. The benefits of this structure over the last structure are fairly apparent. When you are working on a site, when you need to make some changes, you'll usually be making those changes to one area of the site. Say you have a site that handles school registration, and let's say you want to add a rating feature to your schedule display. Well, that involves some changes to the HTML to create space to display the rating. You'll also need to make changes to the controller to handle when the students rate a class, and you'll have to make changes to the service that retrieves and saves the data to the server. You may even want to add a new filter to display the rating a certain way. The point is, you'll be editing 3 or 4 files and adding new files to make this change. Well, with this organization, all these changes happen together. And after you change one file, you don't have to go hunting around to find the other files you need to change. They're all there together. Another benefit of this method is that it has good parity with module organization, which we will discuss next. The question of where your CSS goes will still apply, but that's easily solved by making it a sibling to your app directory, or maybe making another level under app. Rarely does CSS really belong to a specific feature, so including CSS with the features doesn't usually end up making sense. The first drawback to this method is that when it comes time to deliver your code in production, files that are delivered in a similar manner are all spread out. Your HTML partials are mixed in with your JS files. Having a robust build system can solve this issue, but it really depends on whether you want to simplify development or simplify your build. The second drawback is that it doesn't help you identify what type of file you are looking at. It doesn't help you know if a file is a service or a filter or a directive. We will discuss naming best practices in this module, and a good naming practice can mitigate this problem. Here's a variation of the last method. In this one, rather than just throwing all the files into the folder for the feature, you can organize the files by type. Often, the type of file is useful information, and depending on how you name your files, it might not be obvious if a file is a controller or a service or a directive. This really gives you a bit more organization than the last method. This can really help out when you have 1 or 2 features that have a lot of files in it. But it also can be burdensome when you have a feature with only 3 files in it. The extra directories just seem to get in the way. Growing into this method is a little weird. Say you only create the second level of folders once you get at least 15 files in the folder, and then the features that don't have the subfolders feel like they weren't done correctly. Here is another variation on organizing your files by feature. This works well for the largest sites. You might find that even a medium-sized site can benefit from this layout. In this method, you organize by feature, then within each feature you can organize by subfeature. What's great about this organization method is that you can grow into it. First start out with just the folder for the feature. Then, when you start getting too many files, create some subfeatures and move files into those folders. This has basically the same drawbacks as the basic by feature method, namely delivering your code and identifying file types. Let's have a quick quiz to review what we learned. Your file organization has to reflect how code is delivered, true or false. This is false. The organization of your files does not have to reflect how your code is delivered. You can certainly deliver some files one way and some files another way. A good organization method works for both the smallest and the largest applications, true or false. This is false. Most organization methods either work well for smaller size applications or larger size applications, but not both.